Welcome or welcome back because it is episode 2 to the Alchemical Life podcast. This is a podcast that redefines transformation to help athletes prevent injury, improve performance, and achieve more in both sport and life. What is up? It is your host, Abigail Crow, and I am still shaking off podcast jitters. So as I move into these next few episodes in this podcast and in this series, pardon me if I continue to say like and an unreasonable amount of times, which I did in the first episode. Anyways, if you are new, you have not listened to the first episode, you can go back and listen. But if you do not want to go back and listen, which I can understand, I'm going to give a brief summary of what we talked about in episode 1. And then I'm going to go into the topics that we are going to cover today, which I believe will just be sleep. I do not think we're going to get into nutrition, but ultimately it is all things recovery for sport. A lot of the lens to which I'm going to speak through is going to be geared a little bit more toward endurance training. However, every single athlete and coaches who coach athletes all will be able to get something out of this episode. So stay around, because if you're not an endurance athlete, but you do want to know what recovery is, how to recover better, why actually we should be recovering for sport, and what exactly that looks like, then this episode and these series of episodes will be helpful for you. So moving in to what we talked about last week. Last week we talked about what recovery is, why we care about it, if you're under recovered, and then today we're going to talk about sleep. So a little brief overview, actually going to get into some things I didn't even talk about in episode 1 in terms of what is recovery. I wanted to really define it in the form of from a fitness perspective. And there were a couple of definitions that I really liked. One is delineating the difference between rest and recovery. Rest is just is inactivity, right? Rest is just not doing, whereas recovery is actually returning to a better state. And I like the word better state because recovery in normal definition is just getting to a place to be able to do work again. And I think in fitness, we want to define recovery as returning to a state not of normal strength, but physical and mental restoration to perform again at the level that is required of us. And that level that's required of us is going to be ideally at a better state than when we went into the recovery period. Obviously, long term across, not every single day you're going to be making crazy gains, but over the long haul, you will be seeing positive linear growth in terms of performance, and recovery helps facilitate that. So that is why we care about recovery as well after that definition, is because we need it. We need the work, but we really, really, really need the rest, the recovery, in order to improve performance. And rest is involved in recovery, but it is not necessarily the only thing involved in recovery. So I think that's another thing, is a lot of athletes go into recovery periods assuming that it is just a state of restfulness, and that is not necessarily the case. I actually think that turns athletes off to recovery because athletes just want to work. And while recovery is not necessarily active work towards sport, it is not necessarily just inactivity. And we'll get into that in later episodes as well. So we also talked about why it's important, and we covered that a little bit just now, which is it actually helps you, it facilitates better performance later if you recover properly. Metabolic repair is occurring. Also, whenever you have muscle groups constantly repetitively absorbing and producing force across time, you're going to generate fatigue in the actual muscles. So you're going to generate some just actual physical fatigue, inflammation, these metabolic waste products, and that demands a form of recovery. And then we talked about if you are under-recovered and some symptoms of that, which were brain fog, constant soreness, fatigue, poor sleep, physical pain. Actually being in pain is a pretty good indicator. Cravings, mood swings, increased or decreased hormone markers, decreased performance, weight gain, gut issues. That's a huge one. Poor immune health, getting sick. Not enjoying exercise anymore is a really, really solid indicator. And then if you have any kind of increased resting heart rate or decreased HRV, that is those autonomic nervous system variables are really important, especially if you have one of those wearables like a watch or a Oura ring or whatever that help record your resting heart rate and your HRV. Those are going to be great indicators as to if you are doing a little too much or if you are just being a little bitch and you need to get after it. No, sometimes the wearables only go so far. Sometimes if you're just feeling absolute crap for several days at a time, even if your autonomic nervous system don't look too bad, you still need to take rest. Okay, that's a topic for another day though. So today I think I want to move into sleep only. I think we'll save nutrition for the next topic. Most people, when they hear this, they're like, cool. The next how long can you really talk about this? Just sleep. Make sure you get good sleep. But I think it's really important to cover because it's a topic that coaches sort of just throw at a wall, like a term that you need to sleep. Just make sure you sleep. And that's not helpful, and that doesn't give athletes a good enough reason really to prioritize it and to make sure that the sleep is quality sleep. And that is very important to delineate, because just because you're getting a lot of hours of sleep doesn't mean you're getting quality sleep. And also just because you're not getting a huge, long period of sleep doesn't mean that it's not quality. I think that I said that correctly, but the two are actually mutually exclusive, and we need to cover both of those because sleep duration and sleep quality are both things we want to have in our sleep, but they don't always necessarily happen together. So also I think it's just important to cover what exactly happens when we get good sleep and what happens when we don't get good sleep, so that you guys can see the consequences to your actions. Getting into it. I know I'm like blue balls in you guys from this topic. But sleep is, truly, I'm talking about it first because it's the most important element in proper recovery. I know that this is rest. This is the inactivity that we're talking about. And this is the period of inactivity that is the most important. Rest and recovery doesn't have to look like being on the couch all day, eating whatever you want and lounging around and doing absolutely nothing. But one period of rest is sleep, and this part is one that you want to nail down pretty solidly. It is the body's true downtime. This is when you replenish your energy stores. This is when you have muscle repair and growth. This is when you have general recovery from a day of work. This is when you emotionally process things. Any kind of stress accumulated throughout the day, whether it's during your training session, during life, during work, whatever it may be, sleep is when a lot of that stuff gets handled. So it's really important that we get it. And I know there's stuff where people say that you don't need, you only need 5 or 6 hours and you don't need as much as you think. Those genetic variables that indicate in an individual that they don't need a lot of sleep are very, very rare. You are likely the person that does need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. You will find out long term as you continue to sleep sub 7 hours, it will begin to wear on you and you'll see the effects of it. So making sure 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep are happening every single night. And the quality sleep comes from being able to really line up circadian rhythm and get into all of the sleep cycles that you need to. And that quality sleep comes from going to bed and waking up at roughly the same time every day. So those people that work weird jobs, or they have night shift, or they just, some days they don't like to go to bed, they just want to go to bed whenever they want to go to bed, and they want to wake up whenever they want to wake up. Those are things that are going to impede recovery. And if you have a job that affects your sleep time, then there's ways in which we can mitigate the effects of the weird sleep schedule. But as far as just choosing to go to sleep and wake up at strange times, I'd highly encourage those people to actually find a rhythm in sleep and stick to it, because that circadian rhythm is extremely important, and that's what's going to allow for us to get all of the recovery benefits from that period of inactivity. So, what happens exactly when we go to sleep? Well, we have certain things. Two, I would say huge things. One, you're going to work on muscle repair and growth. That's going to happen and replenish energy stores. So your body's working to like make sure all of that our glycogen levels are topped up in the right places, that we have muscle, all of the I've lost my words. I've lost my words. All of our metabolic functions occurring to help with muscle repair and growth and decreasing inflammation, all of those things are going to work at night while we're sleeping, so that when we wake up in the morning, we are at a higher degree of readiness for what's going to happen. Obviously, if you absolutely destroy yourself in a hard strength training session or a hard endurance session, you might still feel it the next day. And that's why we take days off still, because sometimes sleep does not do enough. But what happens on a hormonal and cognitive level, and this I actually find affects recovery, mood, and our performance even more sometimes than the muscle repair growth aspect of things, is when we sleep, cortisol decreases. So we get decreased cortisol for proper recovery, and upon waking in the morning, we have an initial spike, and then it drops. That's our largest spike, or it should be our largest spike. It drops, our largest natural spike. It drops after we wake, and then continues to have natural dips and spikes during the day. So when we sleep, cortisol can decrease. If we do not sleep well, or we don't sleep really a lot at all, we don't get that allotted amount of time for cortisol to lower itself, and then we potentially accumulate higher levels of cortisol throughout the week, and then we feel like shit. Also, ghrelin and leptin, which are our hunger hormones, those are huge at regulating when we are hungry and when we are satiated. Those are regulated during sleep, so we have less cravings upon waking. If you do go longer periods of not sleeping well, you'll find also, if you even just have one night of poor sleep, actually, both me and a lot of other people, clients that I've talked to and other people that I've talked to, will experience dysregulated cravings and just hunger levels outside of the normal. And that's because when you don't sleep well, leptin, which is responsible for keeping us satiated and making us feel full, decreases, and ghrelin, I believe leptin has actually a bigger impact, but across time, ghrelin can then increase, and that is our hunger hormone, which makes us, we want more food, and that can rise. Also, serotonin and dopamine, those happy, satisfied, good-feeling hormones, those are regulated during sleep. And so if you do not get enough sleep, those hormones tend to become dysregulated, and then you feel depressed and like shit emotionally. And also all of that stuff that's helpful in our sleep to sort through, handle stress. A lot of times they'll be expressed in their dreams, which we could get into dreams. I actually need to get a guest on to get into dreams, because I do not know enough about them, but they are very fascinating to me. I don't even know where I was going with that. Oh, all of our emotional regulation can also occur and be sorted through during sleep. And so if we're not sleeping, not only do we not have that filtration process at night, but we also aren't getting that hormone regulation at night. So then it's this double whammy of bad mood and feeling poor when we wake up. Growth hormone. This is the stuff that makes us jacked, okay? Growth hormone is also used to recover tissues during sleep. It is most active during sleep, and so you need to sleep for it to extract, for us to extract all the benefits from our training session. Also insulin, right? So this is the replenishing energy stores part of things. Insulin remains balanced. It helps regulate blood sugar. It helps with proper the right amount of uptake and usage during exercise, and also it is essentially during sleep, sorting, filtering through everything in our body, topping up what we need, replenishing what we need, and then also making sure that that hormone itself stays regulated during sleep so that when we wake up, it is working properly, it is functioning properly. And the other part of sleep that is really important is it helps with cognitive function. Cognitive function is not just important for work, thinking, moving through the day. It's important for exercise as well, especially if your sport, every sport involves cognitive function, but especially sports with hand-eye coordination, eye-foot coordination, a lot of quick moving, a lot of proprioceptive demands required of it, which means knowing where your body's in space and then moving accordingly in a quick fashion. Cognitive function is really, really important. Also, you're making decisions, on field or on the mats or on the court, whatever it is, very rapidly. So sleep is important for repairing and improving cognitive function. There's a lot of this rewiring of neural networks. So any kind of motor learning in sport that you do in sport, learning a new sport is a skill. Even if it's just running, endurance, biking, swimming, all of those things, there's a skill to all of those modalities of training. And when you are asleep, the body is able to actually take those neural networks, that motor learning that occurred during your training, and make them more permanent. Make them networks that are actually going to continue to present themselves and become easier to access in waking time when you're doing your sport later, when you're awake. Memory. Sleep helps you remember things. It's pretty straightforward in the sense of when you go to sleep and you wake up, your body, and you actually sleep quality and with enough time, your body is able to store and remember information that you've taken in. It's just a subset for those rewiring of those neural networks, not just motor-wise, not just the motor learning that you've done, but also things that you have learned throughout the day, picked up throughout the day, and skills that you've acquired throughout the day. It helps embed those into a more permanent memory box. When it comes to sleep and cognitive function, problem solving and decision making is another aspect of cognitive function that we get during sleep. I think I just said the same sentence backwards. All right. Essentially, we get better at making decisions when we sleep well. We make better decisions. And when it comes to sport, training session, intensity, duration, if you're planning or you're programming your own stuff, if you are figuring out if you should go at a certain intensity, if you're figuring out if you should go one more rep or not, if it's something that you have not already planned out, which we can get into programming, how I think that the program should already be laid out ahead of time. But also maybe if you wake up and you're feeling poor and you're wondering, oh my God, I don't have a coach and I don't know, should I take a rest day today? Should I not? Whatever. Getting good sleep is going to put you on the right side of making the better decision, whether it is to rest, or to not, right? To not do the training session that day, or to do it at a certain intensity, or to drop intensity, to still get the training session done, but to cut volume, whatever it is. All of those things are decisions that you're going to get better at making if you've gotten good sleep. And another part of this is the decision making and the problem solving, the emotional side of things. If you get good sleep, emotionally, psychologically, we are better off. And if you go into a training session, anybody who's ever competed in a sport, is interested in sport, participates in just lifting recreationally, but is very interested in it and wants to do very well in it, has a lot of goals. Everybody who's done those things who has gone into a training session emotionally in a poor state, psychologically in a poor state, me all the time, psychologically in a poor state, that it is harder to get the training session in. We notice drops in intensity, the ability to, our overall RPE, our sense of exertion is higher naturally just because we go into the training session already in a state of duress, which can be perceived as stress. And that stress is going to accumulate and mitigate our ability to perform well in our training session. And so sometimes if we are in a poor emotional or psychological state, the best thing to do is sleep. Make sure that in the preceding nights, we are trying to get good sleep, quality sleep. And also I lost my thought. Oh my God. Where was I going with it? Hold on. Brief pause. I'm buffering. Okay. I think I've got it. When we're under emotional duress, it's important that we, help that by getting in the preceding night's better sleep, but also that we can drop off volume potentially in the immediate so that we do not acquire too much stress or get ourselves so worked up over a training session that it ends up not just hurting performance in our training session, but also affecting our performance throughout the day. Because getting psychologically hyped up for a training session that we are not emotionally, physically prepared for, in some ways is way, way, way worse than the actual hard training session itself. Okay? So, sleep is very important. How do we get quality sleep? Well, it's making sure that we go to sleep and wake up roughly at the same times every day. And the other things are going to be, I know everyone talks about how it doesn't matter if you eat right before bed, and I think this is more to the person, but I have found that if you stop consuming food 3 hours prior to bed, you sleep better. People tend to sleep better. I actually have noticed in data, my resting heart rate tends to be a little bit lower when I stop eating a few hours before bed. Stop drinking water a couple hours before bed, because if you do consume a lot of water, you can still sip on it, but stop drinking really consistently a lot of water a couple hours before bed, because then you're going to be waking up throughout the night to pee, and that is going to interrupt your sleep. And then not getting on any form of electronics, if you can help it, about an hour before bed. Really shutting down. I actually I dim and lower most of my lights. I don't have any blue light around me. I turn off most of my electronics, and I make sure that any kind of lamps that are on in my place are these Himalayan salt lamps. So it's more of a red, pink hue of a light. There is no blue light at all. It's very warm lighting. And that helps wind me down for sleep. I also take a magnesium supplement before bed, which helps me wind down and get into the rhythm of sleep very seamlessly. Those are all ways in which you can get yourself to sleep and remain asleep and have good sleep and recover better so that when you go to your sport, you can ball out. I think that is all I'm going to discuss today. The episode is probably already about 25 minutes long, and I did have to edit a few things because even with that buffer that I kept in there was much more buffering that occurred in this podcast episode. And mistakes are not a problem, but complete buffering is just I'd like to minimize the complete buffering during the podcast episodes for you guys' sake. Anyways, I hope this was helpful for you all. We are moving next week into the topic of nutrition. We're going to get into why nutrition is important to focus on, what exactly we should be focusing on, what things are important, and then real takeaway variables that you can apply to your own training so that you use nutrition for recovery in the best ways possible. All right, you guys. See you on the flip. Bye.